Welcome, traveler. Tonight we do not walk the golden paths of heroes. We descend into shadow, into what was left behind. This is the tale of Grûmok, an orc not of war, but of aftermath. Born beneath the broken tower of Isengard, cursed with the name of the White Hand, Grûmok walks not for glory, but to give others the freedom he was never offered. A final path, a final oath. Breathe slowly now. The fire is low, and in the dark, something dares to change. Rain fell without sound on the ruins of Isengard. The circle of stone that had once been proud, cold, white, exact, was now a sinkhole of silence. The once gleaming tower of Orclings pierced the sky still, untouched by weather, but all around it the pits were flooded. Vines tangled through broken scaffolds. Roots cracked stone. What few fires burned in the night flickered low and close to the ground. There were no horns here, no banners, only shadows. And in the deepest tunnels, where the waters didn't reach and the stone still remembered the names of its masters, a boy was born. He was called Grûmok. No one celebrated. No one named him with pride. He was not born for war. He was born after it. The orcs that remained in Isengard after Saruman's fall were fractured things. Not a clan. Not a war band. A scattered snarl of half-starved survivors, most too broken to march. Some were Uruk-hai, bred strong and fast, but now sluggish with hunger. Others were mixed stock, too twisted to even claim bloodline. And none of them liked Grûmok. He was different. He was quiet. He asked questions that made him dangerous. Grûmok was broad of shoulder, but hunched from years of ducking beneath falling stone. His skin was gray-green, with mottled marks along his back where the breeding pits had scalded him. His eyes were pale, not red, pale gray, like smoke too tired to rise. At 12, he no longer listened to the elders. At 13, he no longer ate with the others. At 14, he began mapping the old tunnels. They called him Runt, Wormborn, Maggot of the White Hand. He said nothing in return. He watched. He remembered. On the day the last elder died, Grûmok stood alone in the ossuary beneath the old forge shaft. The bones had long since turned to dust, but a few relics remained. Shields with half-scratched marks, rusted helmets that no longer fit heads, a broken blade with a jagged ivory hilt. He touched nothing but in the corner of the room, half buried in rubble, he found something else. A book. Its cover was scorched, the pages clumped from rot, but the script inside, angular, pressed in ink that shimmered faintly, was still legible. He could not read much of it, but he recognized the sigil, a handprint. White, burned into the paper. His heart beat faster. That night, while the others clawed through spoiled meat or scraped moss from stones, Grûmok sat by the tunnel light and studied the book. There were diagrams, circles of iron, brands shaped like runes, a device made not to wound, but to bind. He turned pages slower now. The writing whispered to him, not in voice, in weight. He did not understand the language, but he understood the fear it carried. In the days that followed, he searched alone. He explored the flooded corners of the tower's foundations, waded through black water that stank of oil and old death, found staircases where none should be, hidden doors sealed by roots, and there, beneath a twisted iron grate, he heard the sound, a heartbeat, but not his. The stone pulsed faintly, warm, alive. He returned to the upper chambers and found the only orc who might still speak with him. His name was Skarn Daturns. Old, thin, scar across one eye. He'd served Saruman once, before the fall. His voice was wet and slow, like he'd never finished coughing out smoke. Grûmok showed him the book. Skarn spat. Burn it. What is it? Old pain, that's all. The brand, don't say it. Why? Because it listens. Grûmok stared at him. Skarn's hand trembled. Brand's real. Skarn didn't answer. Grûmok stepped closer. Tell me. The old orc looked up. You think we were made to fight? You're wrong. We were made to obey. Made with marks we couldn't see. But some had more. The one Saruman chose. His chosen. He touched his chest, right over his heart. He burned the mark into us. We wore it like armor, but it was a chain. That night, Grûmok sat at the edge of the water, staring down into the reflection of Orthanc. He could not see the top of the tower, but he saw the shape of it, and he imagined the brand beneath it, still glowing, still binding. He closed the book and whispered a single sentence. I will find it. He didn't tell the others. They would mock him, or worse, follow him. But the next morning he slipped away into the drowned shafts of Orthanc, torch low, breath shallow, and the stone beneath his feet whispered faintly, like it remembered him. The roots were thicker the deeper he went. They grew like ribs along the walls of the old access tunnel, pulsing faintly with moisture drawn from the drowned basin above. They creaked when brushed, shifted when scraped, as if aware of intrusion. Grûmok stepped around them carefully. His torchlight flickered against stone slick with moss and shadow. The air grew warmer the lower he climbed. Not fresh warmth, stale, like the breath of something trapped too long beneath the earth. The tunnel hadn't been used in decades, not since the Ents broke Isengard's back. But Grûmok had read the signs. In Saruman's book, in carvings scratched into stones, the others never noticed. There was a vault beneath the tower, a true vault, not for treasure or weapons, for binding. He came to a split in the shaft. One path collapsed, sealed in by centuries of dirt. The other dipped downward sharply, iron, rungs barely holding in the damp wall. The stone here had changed color, darker, as if burned. He climbed carefully, boots slipping on mildew. At the bottom, the passage opened into a low chamber, circular, dry. No water reached this far, and the walls were marked. White paint, long faded, stretched in sweeping sigils across every surface, interlocking rings, runes in the language of the old wizards. In the center of the room sat a single pedestal, stone cracked at the edges. Its surface bore a shallow imprint, not quite a bowl, not quite a seal. Grûmok stepped closer and felt the pressure. The room hadn't changed temperature, but the air pushed back. He placed the torch in a bracket and knelt beside the pedestal. His fingertips hovered over the markings, Saruman symbols, not made for language, made for control. He touched one. The stone pulsed. He fell backward. The torch sputtered. Something in the pedestal had responded, not alive, but not dead either. A voice coiled in the back of his thoughts. No words, just heat, like the forge fire memory of a command. Grûmok stood slowly, and then from behind the pedestal, he saw it, a carving in the wall. Crude, angry, a white hand half burned into the stone, and beneath it, a ring, not gold, not jeweled, iron, jagged, just brand. He reached out and traced its outline, and in that moment, he heard Skarn's voice, not in echo, but in memory. We wore it like armor, but it was a chain. The torch dimmed, and from the shadows, Grûmok heard a sound, not a footstep, a rasp, stone moving over stone. He turned slowly, a section of the wall behind him shifted. The root-laced stone curved inward, revealing a tunnel not shown in any map or passage. The entrance was no taller than his chest, but the wind that crept from it was warm. He crouched, listened. Something waited beyond, but not someone. Not anymore. Grûmok stepped through. The tunnel sloped down and to the left. The air thickened. Every surface shimmered faintly. The scent of ash lingered, as if this place had once burned but never cooled. He emerged into a small antechamber, hexagonal, built with precision, unlike the rough tunnels above. White stone veins pulsed along the corners, and in the center, a single iron plate rested on a pedestal, black, warped, branded. It was a forged stamp, large enough to fill a palm, shaped like a ring of jagged iron with cruel tips and inlaid runes. Not jewelry, a mark. It hummed faintly. He approached it without speaking. Each step made his chest tighten. He could not hear the torch anymore, only the hum, only the pressure. He reached the pedestal and looked down at the brand. This was not a weapon. This was something worse. A tool meant not to be held, but to be used on others, and now it waited. Grûmok did not touch it. He looked around the chamber for signs of life. Bones, armor, anything. Instead, he found a carving etched into the far wall, a list of names. Hundreds, maybe more. Scratched deep. No titles, no honor, just names. His torch flickered harder here, and behind these names, carved in smooth spirals, was a single sentence. The mark is not loyalty, it is obedience, and obedience survives. Grûmok stepped back. He looked down at the brand. He understood now. The relic didn't just bear Saruman's magic. It was a vessel, a container of binding will, and somehow, even after his death, some of that will remained. And the once still marked, still hurted, still burned from it. He picked up the brand and pulsed in his hand, not hot, alive. The runes on its surface flared faintly, as if acknowledging him. And somewhere, in the echo of his mind, a whisper stirred. It sounded like himself, but it wasn't. He dropped the brand into a cloth wrap, tied it tightly, and left the chamber. Behind him, the carvings didn't glow, but they waited, as if the story had begun again. By the time he climbed from the tunnels, the stars had risen. The other orcs did not speak to him, but they watched. One orcling stared at his hand. The wrappings pulsed faintly. She blinked and rubbed her own skin as if her old pain had just eased. Grûmok walked past her. No words. The tunnels north of the lower forge had been sealed since the flood. The stone there had cracked, and what little wood once held the beams had long rotted. The others had deemed it cursed, not by spell, but by memory. Too many had died there, they said. Too many had drowned. No one returned. But Grûmok knew better. He had followed the heat. The brand wrapped in cloth pulsed faintly against his chest. Its presence did not speak in words, but it pulled downward, left, always toward something old and waiting. He followed narrow paths past collapsed supply halls, waded through stagnant water no deeper than his knees. Rats watched him from shelves of broken tools. At the end of a narrow corridor, behind what once might have been a storeroom, he found them. They did not speak. They did not attack. They only watched him from the dark. There were 6 of them, young, thin, scarred, none older than 10 winters, orcling runts. Survivors. They had made a den beneath a fallen wall, the stone forming a half-shelter against the ceiling. Bits of cloth hung from hooks in the rock. The bones of small game were stacked neatly in the corner. One of them, a girl with one eye and pale skin, stood first. She raised a broken blade. "Who sent you?" Grûmok did not answer. He stepped into the chamber, slow and careful. The others stirred but did not rise. "I'm not here to fight." "Then leave," she said. "You'll draw them to us." "I don't want them either." The girl lowered the blade slightly. "You smell like the deep." He said nothing. She narrowed her eye. "That thing on your chest. What is it?" Grûmok looked down. The cloth around the brand pulsed, faint red, like breath. He unwrapped it, just enough to show the shape. The children flinched. One whimpered. Grûmok spoke low. "This was used to mark your kin, I know, and now it listens to me." The girl stepped closer. She reached toward the cloth, then pulled back. "It hurt me once," she said. "All of us. When the masters fell, we thought we were free. Then we burned." Grûmok nodded. The brand held more than heat. It held will, and even with Saruman gone, its whisper remained. He stepped forward, past her, and sat beside the remains of their small fire pit. They didn't stop him. "What's your name?" The girl hesitated. "Miska." Grûmok nodded once. "You live here. We hide here. Why?" She didn't answer. He looked around. The walls were marked with old symbols. White paint faded to gray. Finger drawn. You were part of a mark band. We were born in it, carried forward after the war. Our masters fled east. We didn't follow. They didn't care. He looked at them. None of them bore weapons. Just scraps, tools, scars. You've seen it burn. She raised her sleeve. A faint white print curled across her wrist. Not fresh, but not healed. It burns when they get close, she said. Grûmok stiffened. Who? The others, the ones who still wear the mark and obey it. White hand orcs, she nodded. There's a warband outside the southern ridge. They never march alone. They call themselves Ashbinders. Grûmok's jaw tightened. They serve no master. Not anymore. But they follow the will of the brand. They think it makes them chosen. He reached into the cloth and pulled the brand fully into the firelight. The children flinched again. Mezga did not. You want to stop them? Grûmok nodded. Not just them. All of it. She sat. No one's ever tried. He looked at her. I'm not someone. They let him stay. He shared what food he carried. Stale roots. Salted meat. He showed the others how to strip moss from the clean side of the wall, where the water trickled fresh. They listened. That night, the brand glowed softly in the dark, and none of the children burned. Grûmok stood watch at the edge of the den. He held the brand in his hand. It was warm, steady, waiting. He whispered into the stone, I will take it to the fire, and I will end this. He closed his eyes. For the first time since he left the forge shaft, the silence around him did not feel empty. It felt earned. The rain had not stopped in days. It poured into the broken pits of Isengard, like the land itself was trying to drown what remained. The flooded ring below Orthanc glimmered faintly under clouds. Its surface was still, hiding the shattered forges and black wells beneath. Grûmok stood at the edge of the lower shaft, watching the water rise around the old stone lip. The torch in his hand flickered. His breath fogged the air. The brand pulsed beneath his cloak. Steady, warm, pulling. Behind him, Mezga waited, arms folded. She said nothing, but her eye followed him. She did not ask him to return. He wouldn't have answered anyway. Grûmok lowered himself into the shaft with care. The old rungs groaned under his weight, rust flaking into the shadows. He counted them as he went, not to mark the way, but to steady his hands. 35, 42, 50. At 57, his boots splashed into cold, waist-deep water. The torch hissed. He raised it high and moved forward. The water was black, but still. It muffled his steps, made the walls echo quieter. Roots swayed like drowned hair in the tunnel ceiling. Ahead, a broken gate waited, half submerged. Its bars were twisted, not by force, but by something older, melted, as if burned from within. He passed through, and the air changed. The vault was not built like the upper halls. Its stone was smooth, polished in places. The ceiling arched unnaturally. Carvings lined the walls, but not of war or victory. No weapons, no beasts, just circles, interlocking rings, each one marked with a different rune. He stepped into the central chamber. The water rose past his knees. Cold bit into his bones, but the brand grew warmer. In the center of the room sat a circular dais, cracked, covered in algae and old blood. Grûmok stepped onto it. The brand glowed in his palm, and the walls responded. A low hum filled the air. Stone shifted behind him. From the far wall, a figure moved. Not alive, not quite dead. It was massive, armored in rusted plate. The symbol of the white hand still burned into its chest. Its body was twisted, swollen with water rot. Its eyes were black sockets, but the flesh still clung to its bones. Grûmok stood his ground. The thing stepped forward. Water lapped at its legs. It raised one hand. Grûmok raised the brand. The hum rose sharply. The figure froze. Then it knelt. It didn't speak, but its presence pressed into Grûmok's mind like heat against the back of the neck. He understood what it was. A keeper. An Uruk once bound to protect the brand, left behind after the fall, raised by the final breath of Saruman's magic. Not to guard treasure, not to fight intruders, to enforce obedience. And it recognized Grûmok now, not as enemy, as heir. He stepped off the dais and approached the figure. It did not move. He touched its chest plate. The iron beneath was warm. Alive, he pressed the brand against the old white hand marking. The figure shuddered. The mark sizzled, steam rising. Then it cracked. The hand split down the middle. The figure collapsed, not like a puppet with its strings cut, like a soldier finally allowed to fall. The hum faded. The vault dimmed. Grûmok looked at the brand. The glow had softened. The heat steadied. It had absorbed something, a command, a piece of what remained. He turned to leave, but at the doorway, he paused. Scratched into the inside of the stone frame was a single sentence. Not in Orcish. In the language of the wizards, he did not know the meaning, but he felt it. The brand is the fire. The fire is the leash, and the leash does not break. He stepped into the water again and moved quickly. The tunnel above called. Maska would be waiting, and others would be watching. He climbed the shaft by memory, rung by rung, each step heavier, not with fear, with knowledge. When he reached the surface, the rain had stopped. The clouds had thinned. Maska stood alone, her blade across her knees. She looked at him, at the brand in his hand. He nodded. We're not free yet. She nodded back. Then let's finish it. The hills beyond Isengard were steep with silence. Grûmok moved carefully, cloak drawn tight, hood low. The brand pulsed softly beneath the wrappings on his chest. Its warmth was steady now, but it gave off no glow. He had bound it in old leather and soot cloth, not to hide it, to quiet it. Maska and 2 others followed him, the strongest of the orclings. Rek with cracked tusks and fast hands. Nor, who never spoke but saw farther than most. They moved at night, avoiding the main roads. They crossed the wold beneath moonlight, careful to skirt the Rohan patrols. Not even the Rohirrim ventured far into the ruins that dotted the western hills, but someone else did. Grûmok first felt it on the third night, a scent in the wind, smoke, not wood smoke. Charcoal, forge, ash. He knew the smell. He had dreamed of it. The forge they sought was hidden deep in the cliffs of the Stone Eye Ridge, a place whispered among relic runners and goblin traders. Built by dwarves long ago, abandoned during the wars, it was said to house the last flame that burned hot enough to melt rune iron. The brand remembered it too. With every step west, the cloth grew hotter. They reached the ridge at dusk. The cliffs rose sharp and bare, streaked with veins of red rock and dry moss. Birds circled overhead, but did not land. Below, at the base of the slope, sat a half-buried archway covered in ivy and stone dust. A forge mouth. Grûmok paused at the entrance. He looked back once. Maiska nodded. "We'll wait. You shouldn't come inside." "You think we want to see what happens when it melts?" She grinned, but her voice was low. "Be quick." The forge smelled like deep earth and forgotten heat. Grûmok moved through long halls carved with hammer marks and faded dwarvish script. The walls narrowed until they opened into a circular chamber, cracked in places where time had shifted the mountain. At the far end, a furnace. Still, cold, he stepped forward and knelt. At its heart, a bowl of stone, once filled with coals, now black and empty. He drew the brand and placed it there. The moment it touched the stone, the air shifted. The furnace lit, not with flame, with memory. Light flared around the edges of the room. Runes across the walls pulsed gold. The floor beneath him vibrated, a low hum like a heartbeat growing stronger. The brand pulsed bright in the fire. It did not melt. It pulsed brighter. The room grew hotter. His skin began to burn beneath the wrappings. He stepped back. The furnace roared. The brand rose into the air, and a voice filled the chamber. Not Saruman. Something older. "Do you seek to break the chain?" Grûmok did not speak. The voice echoed again. "Will you bind yourself in place of what you burn?" He raised his head. Yes, the fire flared. The heat was blinding. Then place the mark. The brand hovered in the air, waiting. Grûmok stepped forward, breath short. He tore the wrappings from his chest and pressed the brand to his skin. The pain was not fire. It was silence tearing open. His body went still. The forge roared. The stone cracked beneath his knees. He saw visions behind his eyes. Dozens of orcs, bound, screaming, obeying. Saruman's voice hissing like steam, not with pride, with control. He saw the children, their scars, their shaking hands. He saw Maiska's eyes, and he pressed harder. The brand cracked. A single flash of white light filled the chamber, then darkness. When Grûmok awoke, the furnace was cold. Ash covered the floor. In the bowl, the brand lay shattered, splintered into 6 twisted shards. He rose, hands shaking. The pain was gone, but something else remained. His chest bore a mark, not burned, etched a new symbol, a ring broken at the top, the leash undone. He stepped out into the wind. Maska stood there. She stared at the mark on his chest. Her arms were bare. The scar on her wrist had faded. She blinked once, then again. It doesn't burn anymore. He nodded. It's free. They made camp that night near the cliff edge. The sky was clear. Stars scattered above them like carved jewels. Grûmok sat alone by the fire, turning one of the brand's shattered pieces in his hand. It no longer pulsed. It no longer whispered. But somewhere in the hills below, others still bore the old mark. He looked toward the east, toward the edge of the world, and the war band that still called themselves Chosen. He whispered to the fire, "Not yet." They came in the night. No war drums, no horns, only the sound of feet moving fast over stone and root. Grûmok had felt it first. The wind changed. The ground shivered. The birds were gone. Maska had woken just before the torchlight on the ridge appeared. Rek sharpened his blade in silence. Nor climbed to the highest point in the rocks to watch the path. The orclings did not ask if they were running. They waited to be told. Grûmok stood by the dying fire, the broken brand in his hand. He didn't need to speak. They already knew. The Ashbinders, White Hand loyalists, not soldiers, not remnants, fanatics. Those who had burned with the mark and wanted to keep burning. They came with their faces painted in bone ash and soot. Their armor was patchwork, their eyes wide with belief. They moved in formation, quiet and sharp. Grûmok counted 10 from the ridge. Too many. Maska crouched beside him. "We can run. They'll chase us, so we make them bleed first." He looked at her. She's grinned. "We've bled enough." They set the traps quickly. Loose stone above the pass. A ring of torches that could be lit in moments. Smoke root crushed and mixed with river oil. A trick Grûmok had learned long ago from goblin scouts. They would not win a war, but they could strike and then vanish. The Ashbinders reached the Simi camp an hour before dawn. Grûmok waited until they stepped inside the outer ring, then he lit the torch. The smoke root caught fast. A low blast of black vapor curled into the air. The orcs within staggered, coughing, eyes watering. Maska and Rek leapt from the rocks and struck fast, nor rained stones from above. 2 went down before they could shout. The others drew their blades. The fight broke apart fast. No lines, no honor, only survival. Grûmok met the leader in the middle of the clearing. He was tall, scarred, and wore a half-melted brand around his neck like a medallion. His left eye was milk white. His right burned bright red. "You carry what should not be broken." Grûmok raised the shards. "It's already done." The leader bared his teeth. "Then we will burn what's left." He lunged. The blades met once, then again. Grûmok fought low, with weight, using the flat of his axe and the length of his arm. The leader fought like flame, fast and wide, every movement loud. They circled the fire pit. The other orcs clashed in shadow and dust. Nor was hit. Rek limped. Maska still moved like a ghost, but they were few, and the ashbinders kept coming. Grûmok fainted low, then drove his shoulder into the leader's chest. They crashed into the stone, rolled hard. The brand shards spilled from his cloak. The leader reached for them. Grûmok grabbed his wrist, the two locked, muscles straining. The sky turned gold behind them. Dawn. Too late for running, the leader hissed. You think freedom matters? Grûmok's eyes burned. It's the only thing that ever did. He shoved forward. The two tumbled into the fire pit. The shards scattered, and one, still faintly warm, pressed against the leader's chest. The scream tore through the hills. When smoke cleared, the ashbinders were gone. Some fled, some fell, the rest lay quiet in the dust. Maska limped through the smoke, nor helped Rek to his feet. Grûmok rose from the fire pit, skin blistered but standing. The brand shard in his hand was black. Dead, they buried the fallen at the edge of the cliff. No stones, no songs, just some stillness. Grûmok watched the sky. The wind had shifted again. South now. Far away, others might still burn. He looked at Maska. She nodded. We're not done. Not yet. The western hills rose quiet under gray skies. Grûmok walked with the wind at his back, and the shards of the brand wrapped tight beneath his cloak. Maska followed in silence, her blade slung across her shoulders. Nor moved ahead, scouting bends and valleys. Rek walked with a limp now, but said nothing of it. They had left the edge of Rohan behind and crossed into Forgotten Stone, the borderlands between Old Gondor and dwarf-held hills. Roads turned to rock, paths bent upward into cliffs. They saw no flags, no walls, no markers, but Grûmok knew this was still watched. Dwarves never forgot the shape of the White Hand, and they never truly left their forges. They found the smith on the fourth day, a single stone hall built into the cliffside. No guards, no bells, just a low smoke line rising from the mountain's edge, and the smell of coal that burned clean. Grûmok stepped forward alone. He told the others to wait beyond the ridge. He wore no blade, only the shards, and his name. The smith was old, dwarven, broad-shouldered. His beard was trimmed with soot and braided silver. One eye was missing. The other studied Grûmok with no fear, only memory. The orc said nothing. Neither did the dwarf. Grûmok knelt and laid the cloth on the stone floor. He unwrapped it slowly. The shards of the brand glimmered faintly. They no longer pulsed, but they had not cooled. The dwarf stared for a long time. You carry a relic that should not exist. Grûmok nodded. I came to end it. The dwarf's voice was rough stone. Why should I help you? Because I'm not alone. The forge burned bright behind them. The dwarf stood over it with arms crossed. Grûmok remained kneeling, unmoving. The dwarf finally stepped forward and picked up one shard with tongs. It hissed faintly. You bound it, yes, and you shattered over his heart shimmered slightly in the firelight. A ring cracked through the top. The dwarf stared. That is not his mark. No, it's mine. The smith turned back to the forge. He worked in silence for an hour, maybe more. He did not ask questions. He did not speak of war, but he made space at the anvil and laid out a place for the shards. This won't be quick. Grûmok nodded. I've walked this long. I can walk longer. For 2 nights they shaped the fragments. The dwarf melted them slowly in the flame, using a mix of old dwarven forge oil and cooled ash root from the hills. The metal cracked when folded. It screamed when struck. It tried to remember what it was. Fire reshaped it. Grûmok watched every moment. On the 3rd night, the smith brought him a tool. Simple, a flattened disc of iron, etched with a broken ring. What is it? Not a weapon, not a brand. A seal forces you to carry, to show them it's broken. Grûmok took it in both hands. The metal was warm, not with magic, with meaning. He stood before the forge with the seal held high. The dwarf watched, arms folded. What will you do with it? Grûmok looked out the high stone window to the east. I'll carry it until no one else has to. He left the forge at dawn. Maska met him at the ridge. Did he help? He did. He didn't have to. Grûmok smiled faintly. Not all fire burns the same. She looked at the seal, then at the horizon. So, where now? He turned east, where they still burn. The forage wave stretched wide and empty before them. The snow covered the land in layers of silence. Wind carved sharp lines across the hills, where bones of ancient wars still jutted from the ice. Grûmok pulled his cloak tighter. The iron seal of the broken brand strapped flat across his chest. Maska trudged beside him, its boots cracking frost. Behind them, Nor and Rek moved in silence. They had crossed rivers, hills, valleys, but nothing moved here, not even time. Only the cold and the call of the last brand. The trail led them to a narrow ravine, a jagged scar between 2 cliffs. Smoke rose faintly from the far end. Black, sharp, oily. Grûmok crouched at the edge and studied the stone. Tracks. Deep. Heavy. Dozens of boots, spiked soles, orclings. Nor pointed to the walls. Symbols scratched in blood and coal. A white hand, split down the middle, then reforged in fire. Maska's jaw clenched. They're still branding. Grûmok nodded. Then it ends here. They waited for a night. It brought no comfort, only wind. The warband camped inside an old ruin built into the cliffside. Once a watchtower, now fortified with scrap iron and bone. At its center burned a forge pit. Around it, at least 30 orcs, all marked, all armored. Grûmok saw him at once. The warlord. Tall, armored in thick plate, welded from old Uruk blades. His chest bore a fresh brand, not Saruman's, twisted, reforged. His voice carried like steel drawn slow. You feel it, don't you? The fire, the obedience that doesn't fade. Grûmok stood at the edge of the firelight. "I don't obey," the warlord turned. "Then you burn." The charge came fast. Ashbinders surged through the snow, weapons raised, eyes gleaming in torchlight. Grûmok raised the seal. It caught the firelight and burned gold. Some hesitated, others did not. Maska struck first. Rek followed, limping but loud. Nor held the cliff. Grûmok pushed forward towards the forge. The warlord stood waiting, axe in one hand, the reforged brand in the other. It pulsed like a heartbeat. "You want to break it?" Grûmok didn't answer. "You want to unmake what gave us purpose?" He stepped into the circle. "I want to make sure no one ever forces purpose on the broken again." The warlord roared and swung. The axe came down hard, biting into stone. Grûmok dodged left, brought the seal up to block the second blow. Metal sparked. He struck low with his fist, driving into the warlord's ribs. They grappled, fell into the snow, the brand between them. It pulsed again, and the world blinked. Grûmok saw flames, 100 orcs kneeling, Saruman's eyes burning in shadow. A voice like thunder whispering, "Obey." Then he saw himself, standing, refusing. He drove the seal into the brand. The snow exploded in light. The warlord screamed. The metal cracked. The brand split down the middle. The forge went dark. The warband faltered. One by one, they clutched their chests. Their marks faded. Some wept. Others fled. Some fell to their knees in silence. Grûmok stood over the broken brand. His breath steamed. His hands bled, but the fire was gone. Maska stepped beside him. "Is it done?" He looked out across the ruin. "No, but now they can choose." They left the forge behind. No banners, no victory cries, just the cold wind and the broken mark in the snow, and the last leash unbound. The path back to Isengard was slow. Snow melted into mud. Wind turned warm. Spring reached the edges of the ruin, but could not enter. Grûmok walked at the front now. The seal lay heavy across his chest. The brand was gone, but the memory of it still clung to his skin. Maska said little. Rek's limp had faded, but he walked slower now. Nor had grown quieter than ever. No songs followed them. No horns called, but the orcling den beneath the tower still waited, and something else did too. They returned on the 7th morning. The pits around Orthanc had not dried. The water was black as ever. The tower stood untouched, but the tunnels, they had changed. They were not empty. Skarn met them beneath the forge shaft. The old orc had not aged, but something in his eyes had dimmed. He looked at Grûmok. "I felt it." Grûmok nodded. "The brand is broken." Skarn looked at the seal. "Not all of it." They walked together down into the deeper vaults. Grûmok passed places that had once whispered. Now they were quiet, but not still. At the base of the final tunnel, where the roots curled like black veins through the stone, the air grew thick. The pedestal that once held the brand was cracked. Yet beneath it, something pulsed. Maska stepped back. I thought it was gone. Grûmok crouched beside the stone. It's not the brand. Then what? He reached out and placed the seal over the crack. The stone pulsed again. A breath, then a sound, a voice. It did not speak aloud. It moved through the walls, through the blood. You burned the leash. Grûmok didn't answer. You think that means you are free? He stared at the roots curling beneath the stone. You think freedom is silence? He closed his eyes. No, it's choice. The voice faded, the roots stilled, and the crack in the stone went cold. Grûmok stood. It's done now. Maska stepped forward. You're sure? Yes, because it's not calling anymore. They sealed the vault that evening. No guards, no locks, only a carved stone across the entrance. One mark upon it, a ring broken clean through the center. That night, they lit a fire on the hill above the tower. Not a funeral, not a war fire, just warmth. Grûmok sat at the edge of the flame light. Maska beside him, she looked at the seal, resting on his lap. What will you do with it? Carry it, until no one else has to, she nodded. Not as a weapon, no, as a reminder. The night passed quietly, and the tower did not speak. The fires of Isengard burned low, not with ruin, but with rest. For the first time since the tower cracked and the pits were flooded, the lower halls were quiet. No chants echoed down the stone. No brands hissed in the dark, only footsteps. Grûmok walked through the central tunnel alone. The others were resting. Maska slept in the den below. Nor kept watch on the southern slope. Rek had begun planting scraps of moss in old iron pots. Grûmok passed them all, holding one thing. A pouch of blackened ash. The last dust of the brand. He reached the edge of the ruin where the ground turned soft with rain and root. The earth here was half claimed by the end wash, the water curling around stones like it remembered the voices of trees. He knelt and dug, not far, just deep enough. He emptied the pouch into the earth, not to bury it, to feed something else. From his cloak, he pulled a small seed, not orcish, not dwarven, just a pale brown nut, smooth and simple, a gift from the dwarven smith before they left. He said it was stubborn. Grûmok placed it into the ash and covered it with soil. He sat there for a long time. The seal rested beside him, not glowing, not warm, just present. Maska joined him at dusk. You're not waiting for it to grow, are you? He smiled. No, she sat beside him. You think we'll be left alone now? No, but we don't need to hide anymore. She looked at the spot in the earth. What do we call this? He thought for a moment. Home. The days passed without pain. The orclings carved new paths through the stone. They lit fires without needing to hide them. They sharpened tools. They grew quiet, not afraid, comfortable. Grûmok walked the perimeter each morning, the seal hung from his side. He didn't wear it on his chest anymore. He didn't need to. One evening, he passed the old forge shaft and paused. Inside, he heard nothing, but the stillness felt different now. Less like silence, more like peace. He left the seal there, hung it above the door, a marker to say, this path is closed, this chain is broken, this fire is free. Seasons passed, the root sprouted, thin at first, then stronger. By the first spring, it had grown 2 green leaves. No one touched it, not because they were afraid, because they understood. Grûmok stood beside it one morning, hands folded. Maska joined him. She nodded at the sprout. It's ugly, he chuckled. Good. She looked at him. What do we do now? He looked to the hills beyond the ruin. Anything, everything, but on our terms. And so ends the tale of Grûmok of the White Hand. No throne waits for him, no crown, no statue, only soil and seed and silence. Where once there was fire, there is now choice. Where once there was a curse, there is now a name. Spoken softly by orcs who no longer burn. You have walked far, traveler, through ash and water and fire, with no promise of return. But sometimes the ones with no name give it back to others. Sleep now, the brand is gone. The seal rests, and somewhere beneath the roots a new thing grows.